So welcome all to Jumpstart workshop number 7. So yes, we covered the first 4 was revolved around sales. Then we just touched the exec summary and we had capture last week. And now we are moving into team related thing that goes beyond you. How does the governance work? And if you do manage a team, some of the review things that you can use to manage your team comes next Thursday this week. So if you haven't attended for the past 6, please do register. It's free. You can have the recordings, resources, templates, everything is in there. So if you're joining for the very first time, welcome. But if you have attended previously, welcome as well. So today, review and bid governance is very, very, very custom to your own organization. But we will touch what APMP says, and we will touch what I recommend from my experience of working with like 20 companies. And then you can reflect on how your company and how the governance is structured in your company as well. So this is the first wave. As you know, we'll very quickly move from the Jumpstart workshops into masterclass, like 9 intense masterclass. From this bid governance, we have a bid governance masterclass, which will include like 90 slides with some templates, more from it. So I would see how I would love to see you there as well. So there are 9 immense, intense, live 2 hours, 2.5 hours actually, of masterclass that will kick in from June. Do pop in. You can join one at a time, or if you do all 9, and finally, if you do what's supposed to be done, you can qualify as a full stack bidder, and we will certify you as well. So more on this in the coming days, but for now, let's move into 2 parts. This has 2 parts. One is reviews in general, and then bid governance. Reviews is more or less proposal reviews, and then we will have what we call the bid governance that's unique to your company. So let's start with what APMP says as decision points. So you would see the practitioner thing. Yes, this module is slightly revised for practitioner, and this content is raw content from our practitioner certification as well. So it's useful, and I'm sure most of you who are doing this Jumpstart might be aware of APMP. If you're not, browse through them. It's an industry standard, and this gate decision is also an important module, part of the APMP certification, both the foundation and now with the practitioner as well. So gates. What's a gate? Gate decision or a big decision are critical in making decisions in your company. And checkpoints. So as I mentioned, this Jumpstart workshop are checklist driven. So I just want you to take a step back and think in your company or in the previous companies that you work, both current and the previous, how do they review governance, and is it standardized or is it reactive? Does it vary depending on the type of bids? Does it vary depending on the geography? Does it vary depends on the value? You know, so just to take a step back and try to reflect on that while I'm talking about it, because all these pointers are general checklist, but this will be customized based on your company's needs, your process that you follow, the senior stakeholders who are involved in the company, at what point do they dip in, dip out? Is it being done virtual? Is it being done face-to-face? At the moment, everything is virtual, but in the new normal, when we hit up, there will be some sort of meetings. What checkpoints are virtual? What checkpoints are there? Your bid, no bid decisions, everything. But for now, I'm going to keep it generic, and I'm going to give you some pointers, but your pointers, your homework, or is to reflect how this applies to your organization or in your previous organization, so that you could start to see what works, what doesn't work. As I mentioned, the gate decisions start pretty early. It starts from the time you decide what market you're going to operate, and then decide to build what opportunities you're going to bid for. Then you qualify those opportunities. Then you gradually put them into cycle of bid, no bid decisions, bid validation decisions, and final review. In the review management, in the last 50 odd slides, we will look into how the reviews happen, proposal reviews and other competitive reviews and other things. We'll also touch the other way of looking the same reviews is the color reviews, as they call it. So different companies use different things. I am so used to call it gates. We are not familiar with colors, but some people use colors. But again, even terminology wise, what's possible, what's not possible. So after this workshop, you will be given a glossary of governance terms, a 2-page Word document that you could reflect. You will also be given a governance template, a slide deck that big companies use here, which from the time which we worked, the 20 odd slides that we recommend people use it for the governance deck. And you will also have the slides, then you'll also have the template that goes with it. So let's see one at a time. So first of all, it's important to check whether you use standard templates so that you can benchmark one project to the others. And again, with lessons learned review, etc., you're doing it on the right way. So first question is, do you use bid governance in a standard template? Do you have what we call a gate 0 template, no bid, no bid template? If so, is what's available in the market? There are so many free tools available in the market. Can you lift and drop? Because this is more or less helping you to move away from just churning proposals to start to become the decision maker, or at least start to become an influencer in your organization. So that's number one. Number two is, once you kind of build up the standard template, you just need to build expectations around it. So this is more important because what is it you need to share at the right time to get the approval from your clients and also from your buyers. So expectation is part of your maturity that you go through to the project. You'll get more intelligence, you'll get more information about the client from the client, you'll get more information from the tender documents, but your gate life cycle should also mature with the details. And again, setting the expectations of what's available, what's not available, presenting it will be very critical. Again, this is an elevated thing. You are not just writing, you are actually elevating yourself to propose the bid no bid decisions. Can you sell to your boss, to your board, why you should bid for this opportunity? If so, what information do they need to hear to do that? If you are part of a bid governance meeting yourself, how does a bid lead or a sales lead sells the project to the board to help them to go for the governance even before he receives tender documents? Reflect on that. Sit on the meetings where possible as a listener and understand how the whole thing works. So as I mentioned, now 5% as an average, 5% of the cost of the revenue that you'll be make on a bid is the actual bid cost, which means they're part of the bid no bid decision. Relationships are key. Do we have relationship with the existing customer? And secondly, how much cost is going to take for us to bid? Most companies used to use the existing resources to bid for as many opportunities possible, but there will always be incremental cost. Again, it's important for you to understand how your company captures those incremental costs for bid. Metric says 5% of the turnover of a bid. If you're bidding for £1 million, then you're looking somewhere between 1% to 5% of the total cost is going to be your bid cost. So all the way from £50,000 it goes up. So that meant any strategic bids cost will be £1 million. If you're bidding for a 50 million year opportunity, then your cost will easily be £1 million. So again, bid no bid decisions will be driven based on that. Do you have a bid price template? If not, how do they do it? Again, it's something for you to look. As I already touched, part of the question will be probability of happening and winning, because not all projects will get converted. Some projects does fall apart in between, especially if it's a private sector bid. In the public sector, since they have a robust procurement process, when they do decide to go to the market, the probability of happening tend to be 100% or at least close to 90-95%. Very rarely they pull out unless it's a political decision. So the probability of happening, probability of you winning, it also matters there, and gradually those also are the terminologies. Again, in your company, how do they decide bid no bid? There is a checklist in Scribble, bid no bid checklist. There is also bid governance checklist, as I mentioned. You could also download and see how it applies. It's a generic template. You can take it from there. At what point resources are allocated in your company? So when the project gets initially approved, you just get a bid proposal coordinator, who just puts the PQQ in. Then you have once you pass it certain stages, then the bid leader is allocated, or the person is allocated upfront, and he or she works with the bid coordinator or a proposal coordinator to just get it to the next level. See at what point resources are allocated in your company. And as the generic pointers say here, currently, you need to document the gate decisions in every point, because approvals are critical. And while you're working through the approval cycle, it's important for the company to clearly see who approved it, why it was approved, and how the whole thing works from there. So what are the common pitfalls? I'm not going to actually dwell upon. These are common sense, as it's already say. So at certain points, people do say things that they shouldn't say at early stages, and then the company bids, wins, and then they make a loss. It happens all the time. Sometimes you do it voluntarily so that you enter a market and you hope within after 3-4 years you could convert a project. Sometimes it isn't. So what are the things? All opportunity information is known at the beginning of the cycle. Of course, don't. If not, strategy should remain static throughout the decision. It changes. You will decide either to partner with somebody at the very beginning, or you might decide you are going on your own. Then depending on the opportunity, you might decide to work with somebody as a subcontractor. Things change all the time. So when you start early, you had a lower probability because an incumbent is harder, but the more competitive information you receive from all the customer intelligence, your probability of winning gradually increases. So is it important for you to stop the bid just because when you start early on you have a lower probability? So what are the criteria that your company uses to just evaluate? Even though it's a lower probability, you know what? Those are the 3 things that I like about this client. Let's go bid for it. See, or how do they make the choice? So resourcing is unimportant. In many companies, they even have big ticket teams or gold teams. So these are must-win bids allocated to the best resources in the company. Unfortunately, people does have their own A team, B team, C team. Are you part of that team? You might not even know that exists in your company, but it does exist. So if that happens, having the best resource, the maximum budget, you have much more chance of winning. Not exactly the criteria, but having good people around you always helps. So how the resourcing is allocated, as I mentioned. So again, gates are not reviews. It's not like give them tons of information, pass on. It's actually decision points. So many companies have structured blocks from their board. It could be Friday morning, Thursday afternoon, Monday afternoon, you name it, where you have governance calls, sales meetings in your company. When does these happen? Is it blocked? Because having the CEOs or the CFOs, you name it, their time, the board's time, normally the whole the board's time is blocked in advance. And then there will be somebody who manages your Salesforce system or your sales process or a bid production, who then allocates this week, this bid goes for governance. Next week, that bid goes for governance. And this document is going to be sent. So he or she monitors, or what we call the bid planning, delivery of the projects internally, project manage. How is it done in your company? Sales and bidding. So predominantly, few questions. I'm sure your company has the checklist. Some of the questions that Vihar and Pavan asked just now is around it. These are your bid, no bid questions. Can we create a compelling reasons? Have we got our price right? Do we have the right resources, timeline, plans? And at some point, if we start the bid and if some other critical bid comes up, can we still continue happening? The capacity, you gradually move with that. So that's related to bid governance. Nothing to do with the actual proposal, but it's about how your company approaches it. Go and look in your company or in a previous company. I'm sure there are tons of charts around, and see how they are approaching it. Every bid is different and every review is different. Again, how much standardized it is, what's the quality of the bids, the so-called out-of-box thinking. I learned a lot from people who are completely outside the bid, who come on your bid, sit, and they will ask a very basic questions. You talk about that vehicle. Do you have the lease for that vehicle? What happens if we weren't able to get the vetting for the driver on time, if he doesn't have a license? Some questions are completely out of blue, but who comes it? Can you have an independent person who can go for it? And if you, I'm sure very soon you will be at the decision-making level. If you have that authority, include that independent reviews. It makes a massive difference. So if we move on, outside the reviews, moving back again to different form of APMP review, there are multiple forms of review again recommend. This is reviews to depth. Some companies have their own checkpoints, so they won't do this. They might have a gate 2 review, okay, approval to bid for it. Then they have a mid-bid review to just check everything, pricing, proposals, everything. And they have a final review and then they submit it. But much more complex projects, it might go even longer. So, and this is more or less around it. This list key generic outcomes. Yes, those key generic outcomes of the gates will be part of the template that I'll be sharing with her. So we'll get it from there. But for these slides today, it will be generic. But part of your resources, you will have that. You will find that in the Scribble inside. So if you look, but we will also touch some of the outputs here. So predominantly, you might also have companies using the hat word, the black hat, the pink hats, and other things that people use it. So here you have different names. Again, terminology-wise, how does a company use? Opportunity plan review is again a bid no bid decision point. Comparator review is people used to call it black hat. Then you have proposal, strategy review, final document review, business case, and it moves on. So comparator review, what's the point of the comparator review? To understand this is what we are doing. We are putting our heads down, working hard, getting answers for this customer. What does the comparator do? So in some companies, they create ghost teams. When we have a bid that's beyond 50 million annual turnover, we create ghost teams. Yes, it's even more expensive to do a bid, but ghost teams then come and present the solution to the board. This is how we approach. I know it doesn't happen these days, but in good old times until 2010, we used to do that all the time. But now the focus is on proposal automation, churning how many bids you used to do. Before, it takes time to pick a bid, but when you pick a bid, it's a very robust process. So I strongly suggest find how if you're working on a multinational, go back and see 10 years ago, 15 years ago, how did your company do it? That's where gold is. That's where they must have robust information. But anyway, so here we have black hats. So black hats is like it has multiple pointers from comparators and pricing, and you just started to look into this. So in your company, at what point, how much do you talk about competition? In at least 30 to 45 minutes, a slot should be given to talk about competition at the very minimum. If you have like a half a day workshop about a bit, at least 1 slide, 2 slide about this is the competition, this is how they will approach it. Moving on. So you have the proposal strategy review. This is nothing but bid strategy or a mid-bid review. Then you have the final document review. This is like an independent person comes and reviews the documents on your behalf, or somebody who's not involved on a bid, he or she will be asked to do it. Does it make sense? Then you just look into other things. Again, reiterating the same point. Do you have a standard template that people can follow? The review teams, is it being allocated early? And even if it's allocated early, as we have pointed off, do we have the right people asking the right questions? What information are we sharing to them? Having a central point of a group of team or a person to allocate means that you are not sending a governance document 10 minutes before a meeting and expecting the board to get approved to get the information. So for a Tuesday meeting, is it at least being sent 48 hours before so that they could review the document? So that sort of very basic stuff needs to happen. Again, the review team lead, important point that was raised already in this talk, who is going to actually lead it? Who is going to actually sign it? In the good old times, 15 years ago, the person who signs it, it won't be just the CEO or an MD of the business. It's an independent person who reviews it and say, you know what, I looked at the risk, I looked at even the insurance, I looked at where we are going to actually implement it. We even have a nominated person who's going to run this contract, and together I sign off this bid. So have you ever physically have anybody signing off a bid? In good old times, that's what we used to do. We sign it off and say, I reviewed the bid as much as we can with the information that's been provided, and we sign it off. It's like a legal document. Your bid review is a legal document. That means robustness comes up. Whereas today we have governance calls happens, 3-bid governance happens in 1 call with the company. Sometimes it happens. So one at a time, on a Friday call when the CEO is in a car, you never know, but how robust is what point, what sort of respect the bid is being given, what sort of output it's been happened. it entirely depends on the review team. So again, it depends on the CEO, but if you have the choice to structure a review team, please do, please do. So the core team, again, this is part of the bid. If you do have a review team on the side, it's important to have the same people around with you. Remember, review teams are not these bad people who are just going to find faults in your bids. Review teams are people who are outside your bid, but they would also act as your trusted advisors. Do you have people like that in your company who could, again, you don't need to even do it formally. You could do it informally. Informally ask you, do you mind being part of my review team? People would love to advise, so build up. Even if the company doesn't allow you, you as an individual can still ask, do you mind being my review? And without taking too much of the time, I can ask you doubt, these are the issues. Somebody who could be a trusted advisor in your company, it helps, because these are the people who stop you from making silly decisions, stop you from making stupid decisions in certain cases, or encourage you to think in the right way if you're already in the right way. So having that trusted team, neutral team, really, really helps. So I've already touched where possible, bring in some of your teammates. If you are a proposal manager, and if you have somebody else who are a proposal manager, he or she available, can he or she be part of it? And goes from there. Again, using consultants is, this is from the American way, where the bid governance, they bring in external people outside the company. So in our case, we are intelligence partners to many companies. So we provide intelligence directly to the CEO. So the CEO will be looking into the eyes of the sales director or the bid director, and he or she will be saying, this is a glossy project, we are going to do it. But we provide intel to the real intel to the CEO from what we know from the public domain. So he gets an independent view outside the team, so that he could make the decision point. Some companies do it, so not just be part of a bid, but even outside the bid. Have these independent advisors. Does your company can add value out of it? And it gradually moves away from one point at a time. At least record the documents, see what you can do from the documents. So before you go for the next review, it's painful, but believe me, before you start the next review, people normally start from scratch. At least the 6 actions that's been documented, is it been completed even before you started? Sometimes it's just overlooked, and then you realize, oh, I do know that. It's intense, but that's where having an independent person managing this review means he or she will very quickly send the actions to everybody, and he or she ensures that the board gets the action completed in the shortest possible time. Big governance deck, big governance deck, if this is normal, you might have tons of documents, but at the very minimum, if you're allocating a governance deck where your board just given the approval, normally this is how it works. The board is given the approval on a gate 0, gate 2, go for it, done it. And your sales director or a bid director, every now and then he briefs the customer, your internal stakeholder, which is part of the sales meetings or part of the board meetings or leadership meetings he or she is part of. Things are going well, these are the issues, offline things are happening. But now comes a point where the board wants to know, we met 2 months ago, I know you have asked for money, I know you have given this, now give us a deep dive on the project. It's the very first time after the bid governance, your board wants to know a good feel for the project. So this is how it normally happens. What we talked about for the past 30 minutes is ideal scenario where you would expect your board to always be part with you. Of course, they have hundreds of bids. They have hundreds of contracts to manage, and they have so many other issues, investors, managing their own customers, shareholders, you name it. So if this is what you are going to give, a deep dive, 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour, half a day, what sort of information that you can share to your customer? Number one, the attendees who is going to attend, have an agenda, put everything together. This is what we plan to do. The purpose of the meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to have operational and commercial proposition. Again, the best companies tend to have solution review, tend to have commercial review, and then tend to have what they call this governance review. So what that meant is the solution review has already been vetted by the nominated solution people. The operational, the commercial review has already been vetted by the FD, finance director and others. So he or she is already being shared certain information. So when the CEO sees it for the very first time, the operations director has already looked into the solution. The financial director has already been looked, financial and the legal director, head of legal, has already been looked into that. Now this means you already have the internal stakeholders who know a little bit more than the sign-off board, and they will step in to answer some of the questions you don't need to answer. This is an ideal scenario. But if you have everybody completely blank, then you are doomed for big failure. You are doomed for failure here, because they don't want any surprise. As long as you have positive news around the bed, you're fine. Any negative are shut down. So that's how it works. Let's go. How am I going to summarize the opportunity? Some of the checklist here. The checklist is, this is the client, this is the objective, this is the contract term, this is the contracting relationship, this is the timetable, this is the client's budget, and this is our expected revenue, and this is why the opportunity is consistent with our overall strategy of the company. Moving on. We already had a meeting, and this is the meeting. It's already been done. Take previous review documents, if there is any, give it to them. You can have the following slides to just nominate it if you have a previous meeting. These are the action, these are the owner, these are the status. 100% before your final board review, these should be completed. If it's not completed, obviously you know where it goes. No surprises. So next, a status of the bid submission. Where are we as a proposal review has been completed? What are the plans for client presentations if it's already been done? Again, your governance could happen anytime, but this is more or less the final sign-off where you have submitted the document, you are just before the final tender, the BAFO stage as they call it, how it works. Initial bid budget, again, you have already got an approved bid budget, how much you have spent so far, how much will you be spending going forward. Transition or mobilization, again, okay, you believe you are going to win this contract, that's the whole point that you're bidding for this. Now, how the transition mobilization is going to work. Okay, the project is going to be announced, say, January the 3rd, and we need to have the contract live 1st of April. Who is going to do the transition? What's the plan? Do we have a team? What's the cost? Again, as a bid manager, proposal manager, how much involvement can you have with that? Because you have the operational solution already. How can you lift and drop the operation solution to make it live? What is a transition? What is a mobilization? Transition is lifting and dropping the existing contract under your brand. Predominantly, if you have, say, I don't know, if you have Serco who's running the contract here in UK, and in transition, you change the staff, you transfer the staff into your company, you change the name boards, you change the branding, that's transition, nothing much. Mobilization is where you change the solution. Then comes transformation. Some companies use it the other way around, but again, looking into the next stages of a project also matters, see how it's done. Competitors, again, reminding your customer, reminding your board what's the latest with the competitors, how are they approached, who are the final 2 or final 4 who've been selected, why do you think you have the better solution, and how much does the customer know about them, why do you think we can still displace them. Go with that, summarize your evaluation criteria, your differentiation. The best thing about doing this sort of slide for your board is you understand a project even better. So you will be sitting on a proposal trying to answer that question about your customer 1.4 or something, give us an environmental policy of how you have demonstrated sustainability in your organization. But when you take a step back and be involved on creating slides like that, you get that helicopter view or this much bigger view, and you can start to get into the mind of your board, your stakeholders, your senior people. Technical submission, exactly the same. If you already had a technical review, what was the findings? Is it still valid? If so, why? You name it. This is where it's important. Your operational director will step in to just say, hey, yeah, we reviewed it. This is where we are, and you will slowly start to get the buy-in. But if it's the very first time that they do it, then it's a challenge. So differentiate about here, I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but do we have partners? Are we subcontracting? If so, how the whole thing is going to work? What risk are we going to take? What risk are they going to take? And you just expand if possible. The biggest thing that they'll be looking forward is the target operating model. because your target operating model is not part of your proposal submission. All you are doing part of proposal submission is writing responses. But if you take a step back and say, this particular contract is this is the board, this is my team, this is how I'm going to operate. It will be operating from Leeds, from Manchester, from Bangalore, from Delhi, you name it. And this is the technology we are going to use. This is how it's going to be connected to our wider company. All this stuff comes up. Service improvement program, that's where you're going to improve the margin. What are they going to do? Are we going to go low? Are we going to go high? And it just go. Cost breakdown of your own bid between pay, fixed, variable, payment terms. It go on and on and on. And if your estimator or a financial analyst is involved, he or she will be stepping in to run this. Then comes your KPIs. These are the key performance indicators. This is why we won't lose the bid. This is how we might get penalties. Currently, with COVID crisis, many companies have been penalized. Some companies have been given cooling off period. Having this is pretty critical. How much do you know about the key performance indicators of how your customer is going to manage you if you win the contract? And then comes the legal terms, because if you're doing the masterclass series, we will be touching the financial governance, or what we call pricing, how to build a model in a masterclass. And we'll also be looking at contracts as well, so that you also get an understanding of how the contracts is being structured. So contract review, again, key terms in the contract. At the moment, you might have listened, there's something called force majeure. People are using force majeure, which is like act of God. COVID-19 is an act of God. So we cannot deliver the service in the same format, let's terminate, But is COVID-19 an act of God? There is legal, so people are so busy trying to find ways. Nobody has done it. Finally, risk versus reward. You have all the positive news have been shared so far, guys. These are all the risks. And this is how we have mitigated it. Most of the stuff is finger in the air at the moment, but we might be able to solve that going forward. But still, these are the 3-4 things that are red. Please, can you help? A board is not there to listen, nod, and ask questions. They're there to help you as well. Again, is there anything, normally a good board CEO or anybody will normally ask, is there anything else you need from me to help you to win the bid? It's not always like, why are you doing this? At the end of the day, you are trying to make the company grow, and that's it. And it just goes one at a time. Then you agree the decisions, agree responsibilities, and you agree the next review meeting if you do have, but that's it. So this is a high level thing, but there is 3 more governance pack, one for operation.